Good afternoon, my name is Ricardo Ibáñez and this is Ricardo's Time. Today we're going to talk with Edwin Locke. He's a clinical psychologist and an objectivist. He's best known for his goal-setting theory. Let's go, let's do it. Welcome, Dr. Locke. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. All right, so I would like to start by asking you, when did you discover Objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand?
I first read Ayn Rand when I was a junior in college. I first read The Fountainhead, and then as soon as I learned she'd written another book, I read Atlas Shrugged, and I was hooked right then. I didn't know a lot. I didn't fully understand, of course, all the philosophy, but I was hooked.
Right.
And from then on, I took all the courses and read all the things that I could about objectivism.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting, impressive. So you were a teenager, and that was like your first...
Well, I guess I was probably 21.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's pretty young still.
Yeah.
And how has objectivism influenced your life and work?
Well, in many ways, I think I was brought up in religion. I was forced to go to Sunday school and church. I didn't really agree with it, and it wasn't that interesting to me. So I didn't have a philosophy. And I thought from taking a course in college from a very cynical person that philosophy had nothing to do with life. It was just word sounds and petty arguing about nothing. And it was Ayn Rand's philosophy, especially Atlas Shrugged, that convinced me, hey, philosophy is relevant to the real world and to the real guidance of your everyday life. So that was, to me, incredible revelation.
Very interesting. So
that was an important starting. Now, in terms of the actual moral code, a lot of things helped me a lot in my career. Number one was that reality is real. You find a lot of people in academia who have a theory. They want it to be true, but they're not focused on facts. So they evade, they cheat, they lie, they make up stories, and aren't interested in really finding out what's actually true. So to me, reality is an axiom is very important in my development as a scientist. Second was epistemology, especially the idea that you have to have clarity in your concepts, and that concepts were objective, not just meaningless word sounds. This is a problem that plagues psychology now. It's a very big problem of arbitrary subjective definition. A third issue that I found very important was independence. Not just independent thinking about my research, but independent judgment. I found for many years in academia that most academics are very, very frightened of peer disapproval. I mean, really frightened of peer disapproval. If it's something directly in their own small research program, they're okay. But as soon as it gets to anything more broader, they're terrified of peer disagreement. So Ayn Rand made it clear that peer disagreement was of no relevance. The only thing that counted was my own judgment. And if somebody gave me a good reason why I was wrong, that's fine. But I never was worried about approval. Peer approval. So that was very important. Another thing was Ayn Rand's theory of free will. When I was in college, the main dominant force in psychology was called behaviorism. The thesis of behaviorism is that consciousness had no role in life. Everything was controlled by the environment, and basically everyone was a robot based on conditioning through rewards and punishments. And there was tremendous pressure to conform to that. I had people so scared of behaviorism that they would tell me, I can't even use the word consciousness in private with you. It's too scary.
Wow.
People have convinced me if I say that word, I'm a religious mystic, not a scientist. That never had any influence on me, but it was amazing to me how influential it was and how much fear played a role. Behaviorism died in the late 70s from its own irrationality, but I was aware of its fallacies long before that.
Long before.
So those are the things in objectivism. Another element was free will, of course, which was related to rejecting behaviorism, that we are not conditioned by our environment. We're able to make choices, and objectivism made clear what those choices were, the fundamental choice being to use your mind, to initiate the process of thought or go blank.
You have noticed, you already talk of the elements that basically are the main problems that existed during your education and your work experience.
Yes.
How was the environment there? Because you have worked with people around you that, were more against objective reality. So wasn't that like an adversity for you, an obstacle?
Well, not too much. One positive, behaviorism never penetrated too far into industrial psychology. Now, the reason anyone who works with real people in the real world knows we're not all conditioned by the environment. People in work make choices. People in business make choices. And everyone knows that. So there were some champions of behaviorism, but not very many. So I had some articles rejected in some cases, but on the whole, if I published in my field, I was able to get things published talking about conscious goals. If I tried to publish in experimental psychology, I tried it once. They rejected my article out of hand, said we can't have stuff like this in our journals. So, But industrial psychology was open to goal-setting research.
Fascinating. So let's move ahead. Could you please explain me as briefly as possible? I know this is difficult. What is goal-setting theory? Okay.
Now, the important point is that goal-directed action is at root biological. Okay, because living entities have their existence conditional upon goal-directed action to satisfy their needs. Goal-directed action is the core of biology. All organisms, even animals, have to engage in goal-directed action or they perish. And if the species doesn't do it, the species perish. Now, the unique part about man, human beings, is that goal-directed action is partly automatic, such as your heart, your lungs, your liver, your kidneys, your brain. All of that works automatically and unconsciously. Through evolution, that's where we got from the lower animals. So that all works automatically, but that's not enough to survive. You have to make choices in terms of actions in the real world.
Exactly.
Here, you have free will. You have to make choices. What goals I'm going to seek? What goals will facilitate my survival? What goals will harm me? How will I plan short versus long range? What about goals versus ethical goals versus business goals versus romantic goals? All of those things have to be chosen. Now, goal-setting theory was designed primarily to talk about how to be productive at work.
Okay.
Because we were industrial psychologists. And so several hundred studies done by ourselves and others found that the most effective goals were, number one, clear and specific as opposed to vague. Number two, challenging. If you want to accomplish anything, you have to have challenging goals. If you have goals that are vague, you can go off in 12 different directions, such as doing your best. It has no meaning. If your goals are easy, you can accomplish something, but not very much. So goals need to be challenging and specific, and they only work under certain conditions. You need feedback to track your progress. You need a commitment to the goals. based on your values and your competence.
Mm-hmm.
You need communication with others if you're going to do joint goals and the like. So that's what goal setting theory has been mainly focused on. In more recent years, it's been applied to other realms such as sports, psychotherapy, business and finance and the like. So we've just taken a biological imperative and showed how do you actually use goal setting to make your life better.
In one of your chapters on job satisfaction, continues to be one of the most highly cited pieces of work in your field. However, once you said, our understanding of this phenomena has not advanced at a pace with research efforts. A major reason for this lack of progress is the implicit conception of causality accepted by most psychologists. Could you please elaborate on this thought?
Okay, this is really from behaviorism that causality is a billiard ball model. One billiard ball hits another billiard ball, which is another billiard ball. And in human beings, the billiard balls are outside you, so they glom onto you through environmental pressures and conditioning and rewards. And that forces you to act in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that in human beings, there is self-caused actions, namely the actions of initiating a process of thought and initiating planning and choosing goals and choosing the methods to achieve them. So free will in human beings has to involve choices initiated by the person from inside, by the power of regulating your consciousness. So that's what's an important point. So the billiard ball model is fine for billiard balls. It's not adequate for, and it applies to your internal organs. Your internal organs are regulated by chemicals and electricity. So, okay, that's not enough to live. You've got to initiate thought on your own in order to guide those actions if you want to live.
All right. What is postmodernism and what is its relation with Immanuel Kant?
Postmodernism is a modern movement that basically ends up as being the total destruction of philosophy. By saying there's no such thing as objective knowledge. Immanuel Kant said that the real world, the noumenal world, is unknowable. It's not knowable because the brain imposes concepts such as causality onto you outside your control. And all you have to do is conform to that, and all you can do is be aware of your experiences imposed on you by your mental structure. Mm-hmm. So Kant was the first major philosopher to say consciousness is not able to give you knowledge of the real world. So this set the stage for postmodernism, which says that's true, you can't know anything about the world, therefore anything goes. It's all subjective. Mm-hmm. To tell you how deep this goes and how preposterous it games, some postmodernists say gender is an arbitrary construct, like the difference between males and females. It's an arbitrary construct with no basis in reality. So all I can say to those people is get naked and look in the mirror. Do you see any difference? If you don't, you've got a serious problem. So that's how deeply it's destroyed the capacity to think. Right. And knowledge seeking a useless process.
Because we also have now like gender.
Well, transgender is not an invalid concept.
Okay.
Remember, because transgender means you're born with a certain body, but your brain chemicals are not in concert with that. It's not a moral issue. Right. It's just like homosexuality. It's not a moral issue. Right. Brain chemistry is different than most people. And like homosexuality isn't chosen typically. It's really genetic. And nobody knows, all the evidence indicates it's genetic. Nobody knows all the chemicals involved. Some suspicious. Right. And in transgender, it's even more difficult. And you have to sympathize with those people. It's not something they chose. It's not something they can help. So you could say it's biologically abnormal, but not immoral.
Right, exactly.
So, okay.
Perfect. So I wanted to ask, you already answered this, but maybe you can have a little more, add something more. Is free will real, and determinism an illusion?
Yes. It's real. Now, the problem with determinism, which says you can make no choices and everything is determined by your environment and your brain, and you add nothing to that by your own choices. So that's determinism. You're totally passive. You're like a programmed robot, literally. Now, one of the problems with determinism is it's self-refuting. Mm-hmm. If that were true, how could you validate any knowledge, including the theory of determinism? Because what would you have to say? Well, I can't make any choices, but I'm compelled by my brain and my environment to believe in determinism. Okay, and wouldn't that be true of people who believe in free will, that they're determined by their brain and their conditioning, and so you're in an impasse. Nobody can know anything, and you can't get anywhere, and all you can do is throw up your hands and say, I'm just going to act like a robot, and so is everybody else. So it's completely self-refuting if you believe you have no choices. So it refutes determinism, it refutes everything. So free will has the status in philosophy, based on Ayn Rand, as an axiom. An axiom is the base of knowledge. Ayn Rand's axioms are reality, causality, consciousness, and they're the starting point. If you don't have those, you don't have knowledge of anything. Free will is an axiom of any kind of attempt to know anything. If you can't make choices, then you're just spouting computer printouts. So determinism gets you nowhere. It leads you into a dead end. So if you're going to know things, you have to have a method of knowing, and you have to have control over applying that method to the fact. So that's what free will involves. And that's Ayn Rand's great contribution to show that consciousness is an axiom, and specifically free will is an axiom, and can't be attacked or refuted without self-contradiction.
So many intellectuals in academia still ignoring Ayn Rand's proposal and staying in the same, tradition of...
Well, most academics, even though they are supposedly intellectuals, are really not intellectual. Most of them have very few interests outside of their narrow specialty. And if they jump into politics, it's not due to philosophical thought, it's just due to conformity. They don't actually have a philosophy they can actually think about. Mm-hmm. So they're not intellectuals in the real honest sense of wanting to study philosophy and to find out how to know. It's just not something that interests them. So they're pretty much stuck with the status quo.
Okay.
By default. Even if they're not consciously conforming, if they're passive, they're going to conform subconsciously because they have nothing else to go on. So that's the problem. So most intellectuals, of course, are left wing, among other things, because what the right has nothing to offer but religion, so that's not going to help them.
Right.
The leftists fundamentally want socialism. They aren't pro-Venezuela. They're not that far gone, but they want something as close to it as they can get. I think their ideal For the conservative, the ideal is a religious state controlled by religion. For the leftist, the ideal state is a guaranteed life, guaranteed by other people. Your life guaranteed by other people. Everyone's guaranteed to support other people, and no one has a right to their own life. So those are the two fundamentals, the conservatives versus the liberals. So I'm against both, of course. That's why objectivism gives me hope. But it's not popular, and it's not. If you study objectivism, it's very hard work. Most people don't want to. And if you study objectivism, you're going to make enemies, because most people are going to persecute you and intimidate you and mock you and insult you. How could you possibly be to have views? You're for capitalism. How could you possibly do that? You know, that kind of thing. So that's the problem with intellectuals today.